Welcome to the Beyond Fat Loss podcast, where we don't just tackle fat loss, you learn about all the good stuff that follows. How to build muscle, how to enjoy more food, and how to stay lean without going to extremes. We are your hosts, Jean and Sean, and today we're going to discuss a red hot topic, and that is your metabolism.
This is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and controversial topics in the scope of health and fitness. You frequently hear disempowering terms being thrown around, such as, I'm unlucky to have a slow metabolism, or it's all downhill from your 30s or 40s or 50s. You can insert whatever decade that the person is in when they're giving you this information. Generally, this is just whenever somebody starts to notice their decline and they assume that everyone else is going to have exactly the same decline. We're going to be putting ourselves well in the firing line with this one and reveal what the science says about your metabolism and why blaming your metabolism for the reason why things change can be a false narrative that's holding you back from looking and feeling how you'd like to be in whatever stage of life you're in.
This is going to be a juicy one for sure. I can feel it already. There's going to be a lot to chat about, a lot to discuss, a lot to debunk, and hopefully flipping people's mindsets around so they can feel empowered by the end of this podcast.
That's going to be a key theme, isn't it? Because one of the big problems I think that happens in the fitness space is that we get good quality information from research that then gets put out into the online space with a real lack of compassion, a real lack of sensitivity for the individuals that are going to be absorbing this information. What myself and Katie are hoping to bring to you as listeners is a more positive outlook on the research. So when we debunk myths like the myth about metabolism being the be all and end all, we can start to frame it in a way that you've actually got some actionable advice that you feel positively about that you can take control of and actually get better outcomes for your health, for your body composition, and for your well-being moving forwards. Rather than just feeling like we're here to have a go at you, because that's absolutely not the case.
Nothing productive comes from that, is it? We're going to explore both sides of the argument because many factors play a role in the amount of calories we burn each day. But by the end of this podcast, you'll have a much better understanding about what you can control and how to make sure you can burn as many calories as possible per day without it being unrealistic to sustain. Now, we have a plan of what we'd like to cover on this podcast. However, we're quite aware this is quite a hefty topic and it may need to be covered on 2 podcasts. So we're going to see how it goes as we're chatting through the points that we'd like to cover. We'll keep an eye on the time, and if it does become too long, we'll split it over 2 podcasts. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I don't want to dilute the quality of the information that we're giving. And I also want to have enough time to discuss different subsections of the population, because a lot of people listening to this will be different sexes, different age brackets, different stages of life. And so I want to give a little bit for everyone in this podcast when it comes to metabolism. I think splitting it across 2 episodes would probably be the wise move.
For sure. So I'll keep an eye on how long you're talking for, Sean Dallo, and then make a call a little later on, is it?
Love it. We've had some lovely comments and some kind shares following the last few podcast episodes. It really helps us on our mission to provide good quality, evidence-based fitness content, but with a sprinkle of a human touch involved. If you enjoy the episode, like, comment, or share, and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on so you don't miss an episode. And more importantly, so you don't miss part 2 of this episode. Because I have absolutely no doubt it's going to end up being 2 parts.
I have no doubt either.
I've had a coffee this morning, you won't be able to shut me up.
It's like rocket fuel as well, guys. Sure, they're getting stronger by the day.
Yeah, we've made like the transition from just standard coffee granules to using coffee pods from a coffee machine, but we're currently in our cafetiere, aren't we? And let's just say that we're meant to portion it out a little bit less generously than what we do.
What Sean does.
Who did it this morning?
If I remember correctly, though, you're like, bit more than that.
Yeah, I didn't mean another 10 grams of ground coffee. There's somehow a way that this always ends up being my fault, isn't it? I don't know if this is what everyone else's experience of marriage is like. Mine is certainly, it doesn't matter how good you do, there will always be something you do that's your fault.
Happy wife, happy life, isn't it? Isn't that the motto to go by?
Yeah, what's the term for how the blokes take the blame for everything? Anyway, drink your rocket fuel and put all your effort into the podcast rather than critiquing my inability to measure coffee correctly. For those of you that are on socials, we're both on Instagram. We'd love to connect with you. You can find our pages in the description below. If you drop us a follow, you'll find more content about things like how we're currently getting on with our aggressive diets, because we're both at the stage now where we're having slightly different experiences of the diet day to day. So that's really interesting. You can see how we're guiding our members through their busiest social months of the year. Summer is incredibly full on for a lot of people, especially parents as well. But people that have a lot of social lives, there's a lot of our members that are traveling for work commitments at the moment that seem to be ramping up over the summer. So come along, see what they're getting up to and how we're guiding those through it. And of course, if you're into your muscle building training, you can really make the most of how to be as time efficient and effective with those training sessions in the gym as possible, which is really important now going into summer months where you might find that your time is spread a little bit more thin. You might not be able to get to the gym as frequently. So you want to make sure that every session you do is getting the positive response that you want. Katie's obviously not had enough of the rocket fuel coffee because as I'm saying this, she is topping up in the background.
Yes, I do.
Are you by any chance trying to accelerate your metabolism with your extra coffee?
That's what it does, right?
Oh, yeah, of course it does. So let's bring our attention back to energy metabolism. And as is often the tradition, I'm going to fire one straight to you, Katie. So, what are we even talking about when it comes to metabolism?
I'm not quite sure how you manage to wangle the start of these podcast episodes. Every time, no matter if I start or you start, I get the first question. How did you wangle that every time?
That's just good planning, isn't it, really? First thing on my CV, strong organizational skills. Always hands the first job off to someone else.
Great delegator. Okay, so what are we talking about when it comes to metabolism? There are far too many terms which are all thrown around too loosely and are used interchangeably that I think just confuse the process. So to put it simply, your metabolism refers to all the chemical processes which occur in order to provide you with energy from food or drink.
So it's a really broad term, isn't it? Like metabolism is a broad term. It's a definition that describes everything that goes on in your body in regards to energy going in and what that energy then, or what is done with that energy once it's in the body. The confusion is that a lot of people describe their metabolism as how much energy is being burned by the body each day.
It's a little bit more complex than that, isn't it? It's not just how much energy you burn.
When we talk about how much energy you burn each day, what we're really referring to is our total daily energy expenditure. I'm probably going to say that about 5,000 times in this podcast, or I may abbreviate it to TDEE. So really important that you get familiar with this term. So that's the total amount of energy that you burn in everything you do throughout the day.
We will break that down a little bit later on in the podcast. Explain to you what makes up your TDEE, so your total daily energy expenditure, so that you can have a little bit more understanding and understand the elements that you can control.
A lot of people also confuse the term metabolic rate with TDEE as well. Metabolic rate is closer to what we're describing when we talk about the amount of energy that's burned every day. When we talk about metabolic rate, this is just how quickly energy is used up over a given time period. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's how quickly it's used up over a day. DEE is a measure of your metabolic rate over a 24-hour period. But you can look at metabolic rate for the purpose of a particular match in sport, for example, or you might have a particular test in a lab to test something like VO2 max or certain aerobic capacity tests or anaerobic capacity tests that will basically look at the metabolic requirements during those bouts of exercise or those levels of exertion. So metabolic rate kind of covers a few different aspects, and it's all relative to how much energy is burned in a given period of time.
I think you explained that very well, Sean. Very well. I think in short, a good way to think of it is your metabolism powers your body, and TDEE is the exact measurement of total energy output per day.
Yeah, great way to put it. When we're considering the direction of weight change then, which is often what a lot of people will kind of correlate with their metabolism. Weight is going up or there is a harder time losing weight. This must mean that something has changed with the metabolism, that typically the metabolism is either slower than it used to be or you naturally have a slower metabolism. What is the key consideration when it comes to metabolism that we should consider for this? Is it metabolism as a whole, our metabolic rate, or is there a more accurate way to look at this?
This just comes down to energy balance. How many calories have you got going out and how many calories have you got coming in? That can and will change throughout different seasons of your life, not just depending on how much exercise you do, but your lifestyle as a whole.
But what we're looking at with that is for calories in versus calories out, we're looking at your total daily energy expenditure as your calories out. That's how many calories you're burning each day versus your total calorie intake
How much food and drink you eat.
each day.
I think where the misconception lies here and why people can get, I guess, either misled, a little bit confused with their metabolism getting slower, then thinking about calories in or calories out, or not even considering calories in and calories out, just thinking as we age, our metabolism slows, that's why we're gaining body fat. And I do think a lot of people think that periods of weight gain are primarily driven by their body using energy more slowly.
Which isn't necessarily wrong, right? Because they might not necessarily be using as much energy in a 24-hour period, and that multiplied over a course of a number of weeks. There might be some sense in that statement, right?
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. But I think this is an oversimplification and in some ways is not accurate.
Did your rocket fuel coffee not help you say that word then?
Did I what come out of my mouth then?
No. You said it well. I think it was just, it was quite slow and deliberate, a bit like your aging metabolism. Yeah.
Imagine I didn't have the rocket fuel, then it would have come out like oversimplification. Why are you looking at me so oddly then? God, don't distract me too much. It doesn't take a lot to NAD to my mind to shift. So back to the point where we were discussing that people think that perhaps their body's using energy more slowly. It's not necessarily that the body is using energy more slowly. It's that the body is using or burning less energy overall than it previously was. And more energy is being consumed than is being burned.
I think this is what we often see hand in hand, isn't it? A reduction in the amount of energy that's being burned each day. And we'll discuss some of the reasons for why that is the case very shortly. And it's an increase in the total amount of energy that's being consumed and the amount of calories that are being consumed. Often without realizing it, but in some cases it is noticeable, but there's still a lack of understanding about exactly how much of that energy is being consumed, especially for individuals that aren't familiar with calorie awareness and calorie tracking. Even people that do calorie track are shown to underreport their calorie intake by about 20% on average. And unfortunately for obese individuals, the research actually suggests that obese individuals can underreport by about 30 to 50%, which is a very, very high amount of calories. And I think a lot of that comes from a lot of the stigma and the association with how larger individuals are treated when they're seen to be eating more. They feel embarrassed almost by their eating habits and by how much they consume, which of course is an awful thing. But the point I'm making is that it's quite easy to underestimate how many calories you eat. And even those that are trying to track it will often try and cheat the system a little bit by underreporting. Sometimes sometimes it's subconscious. They're not aware of those extra calories that are in the food, or there's some tracking errors that occur. But there are also times where things just don't go in the tracker because they don't want to be seen and they don't want to be aware of it.
I think it's a combination of both a lot of the time. We've also got alongside that, right? We know it's very common, it's been proven that as humans we tend to underreport the foods that we eat. We also tend to think we burn more calories than we actually do through exercise as well. And that combination together, that's where it can become really tricky, right? Because you're not only consuming more calories than you think you are, you're actually probably burning less calories than you actually are. So together could leave you in a bit of a tricky spot where you're actually eating a lot more calories than your body needs, which over time can and will lead to weight gain, fat gain even.
Absolutely spot on, Katie. There is a massive overestimation of how many calories are burned through exercise, especially. Something that we're going to get onto very shortly.
So I guess the question is, Mr. Darlow,
My turn.
I'm getting there before you get in there this time. How much of this is down to our aging bodies and how much of it is down to factors within our control?
That is an excellent question. Fortunately, research does provide us with a lot of answers to this question. But before we go into all that and before we start going into the scientific literature a little bit more, I think it's important to have a bit more of an understanding over total daily energy expenditure in itself.
Yep.
Because there are going to be a few terms that come up as part of this that will be important to understand before we break down the scientific literature, right? So let's discuss what makes up the different parts of total daily energy expenditure. If we talk through each section, so the first part and the part which most people are familiar with is BMR, so basal metabolic rate. This is essentially the amount of energy that is burned at rest in order for regular body functions to occur. So anything from breathing, respiration, energy metabolism overall, food digestion and transportation, your organ function, hormone production, all of these things are naturally occurring outside of your control. It's all the stuff that your body is doing to keep it alive and keep it functioning when you're at a complete state of rest.
Then I like to think of the physical activity side of things to be broken up into 3 categories, which is your exercise energy expenditure, EEE. I don't know how much we'll use the shortened abbreviations, but I'm going to cover them now just in case we do use them throughout. And I'll break each of these components down in a second too. So you've got EEE, exercise energy expenditure, NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and then you've got NENAT, which this is a new term for me actually, which I've learned through MNU, the nutrition qualification I'm doing at the moment, and I quite like how this is split up because it makes sense, which I'll cover in a moment. But NENAT covers non-exercise, non-activity thermogenesis. Whew, wasn't sure I was going to remember that then. So all of these 3 cover physical activity, but it's the type of physical activity that it covers. So EEE, exercise energy expenditure, you can probably guess that one is quite simple, right? That's the deliberate exercise or training that you do. That's going to the gym. That's going for a run. Playing sport, for example. I think that one's quite simple to understand. And you've got NEAT, which I'll probably guess a lot of you listening to this podcast might have heard NEAT being thrown around. And this is an activity that isn't specifically exercise, but it's intentional. So it's gardening, it's cleaning, shopping, getting your steps in, pottering around the house. Those kind of things are your NEAT. They're deliberate. You know you're doing them. You're aware of it.
I think it's fair to say that those are often done without like a task in mind for it, without it being framed as this is my exercise. This depends on your physical activity levels, of course, your level of fitness, because for some individuals, a brisk walk is exercise because it does elevate the heart rate to a certain extent, and it is part of the transition back to more physical activity. So there are some nuances to this, but you're not necessarily cleaning the house for the purpose of training to be better at cleaning the house or improving your fitness levels. You'll clean the house because you want to clean house. It just so happens that it burns calories because it's physically active. Same with pushing the shopping trolley around the supermarket. Same with doing your gardening. It's not the primary purpose or benefit of doing that activity, right?
They're lifestyle activities that you need to carry out. They are conscious activities, I think is the best way to put it when you talk about NEAT. They're conscious activities that you need to do in your day-to-day life that aren't necessarily driven for performance benefits, but they do need to be done and they're going to utilize energy. Then you've got NENAT, and this is that kind of subconscious activity. The stuff that you are doing that you're not really thinking about, you're not really aware of. So this is your fidgeting, your facial expressions. Like my hands are flapping around as I'm talking now, recording this podcast.
Shivering when you're cold.
These are all things that come under NENAT. And that's why I like NEAT and NENAT being split up, actually, because, and the simplest way I think to think of it as is NEAT is your conscious activity, and then your NENAT is your subconscious activity. But they all burn calories, right? And they make up the portion of TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure, that comes under your activity.
Yeah. The reason why I'm breaking those down will become more clear to you as we go on through the podcast. But essentially, not all physical activity is the same. They're not all equal in terms of the amount of energy they burn or use up each day.
There's one more, isn't there, Sean, that makes up TDE?
Yeah, and that is the thermic effect of food. So this is the amount of energy used in order to break down, absorb, and metabolize food. Protein typically requires the highest amount of calories to be burned in order to digest and absorb, and fats are typically the lowest. But even within those groups, we have differences between different food sources. And also, it's probably worth noting that when you have a healthy, balanced meal, that changes the energy burn in order to break down that meal. So this is why well-balanced meals are often considered to be a little bit more useful for fat loss for the thermic effect of food, because you can take certain food sources that would typically be digested and absorbed reasonably quickly, and not have a high energy cost in order to break down, and pair them with a very protein dense food source or a very fiber rich food source. And not only would that help with the release of that energy being slowed a little bit more, but you may also experience a greater thermic effect of food. So a few more calories are used to break down and absorb that food. What I would just like to note quickly is that the thermic effect of food isn't something I would necessarily recommend prioritizing. It's more a case of just be aware, if you eat a lot of protein, if you eat a lot of fiber, you're going to be potentially burning a little bit more calories per day than a diet that's very low in protein, very low in fiber, and has a lot of more readily digestible foods.
I think that's an important point to note, because I wouldn't want anyone to run away from this podcast and think, oh, I'm going to burn way more calories now because I'm eating more fiber-rich foods and higher protein foods. It's more of just an awareness of the fact that your body does need energy to break down this food and absorb this food and use this food, right? It just becomes part of the bigger picture. I think that's what's important to know, because the more you can understand how all these little pieces fit together, the more it gives you backing it gives you to follow a diet that is fairly high in protein, rich in fiber, because it has more than just one reason to do it. And I think the more reasons you have to do something and the more it's going to benefit you, the easier it is to buy into something.
I'm a big fan of these bonus benefits, these additional benefits to things. And for me, like if you're eating a healthy diet that also happens to burn a few more calories in order to break down and absorb the food, I think that's a big win, because it just means that you're going to be able to eat more food overall. Your primary benefits are all covered by the fact that you're eating the healthy food in the first place. So the primary reason for eating more protein is, to build and preserve muscle mass as much as possible. But there are additional benefits to eating more protein, one of which is the fact that it takes a few more calories to break down and absorb. So it makes sense for you to have a diet that's high in that, particularly if you've got a big appetite, particularly if you like having the ability to eat higher calories and you want to maintain your body weight and your body fat levels on higher calories. Yeah, I'm a big fan of having these additional benefits as part of your healthy routine.
Absolutely, it's a bonus, isn't it? It's another cog in the overall machinery of okay, I'm going to get this bonus, I'm going to get this bonus. Because like you said, Sean, protein is there, right? It's for the repair recovery. But outside of what it does for our body once we've consumed it, it also makes us feel fuller for longer. So that's going to help with our appetite levels. And then you go, oh, okay, so actually it's going to burn more calories breakdown too. Another bonus. There are lots of elements of your nutrition that don't just serve one purpose. And if you can open your mind to the other benefits it brings, then you're giving yourself more reason to carry out these actions on a daily basis.
And not to turn this into a protein podcast or a food source podcast either, but just before we move on as well, I just thought I'd like to cover quickly. Not all food sources are made equal, as I mentioned. And even if you look at things like protein, don't just assume because you've got protein products with protein powder added to them, or you're drinking a protein shake, that it's going to have exactly the same thermic effect as something like a chicken breast or a tin of tuna. And remember that whole food sources or less processed food sources will have a higher thermic effect of food. They will require more energy to be broken down. When you have supplements, powders, or products fortified with more powder, typically what you'll see is that these foods are broken down a little bit more quickly because in the case of protein powder, it's designed to get into your system quickly. It's designed to be broken down to a stage where it's easily absorbed. So again, take that advice with a pinch of salt. Don't just go start smashing protein shakes and hope that you'll burn some more calories every single day. Maybe worth considering getting more protein from whole food sources if that's the case.
Agreed. And there's still so much more we could cover on that front, but I'm going to park it there. And perhaps this would be a future podcast because there's lots to cover in that front too.
There's lots of 1%ers there, isn't it, with foods? But there we are. Let's move on before we start off a whole different line of inquiry.
So let's bring it back to TDEE. We've explained what makes up TDEE. So you've got BMR, your basal metabolic rate. You've got your exercise energy expenditure, EEE. You've got your NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Your NENAT, non-exercise, non-activity thermogenesis, and then your TEF, the thermic effect of food. Now, you know all of those make up your total daily energy expenditure, so how many calories you burn overall every day. But those categories don't have the same weighting. And this is where, if you understand this, you can understand the elements that you can control.
So how much do each of these components make up your TDEE, Katie?
So I'll bring that down for you. And these are rough guidelines, right? So think about around these figures rather than it being absolutely spot on to these figures.
Yeah, these are averages.
Yes, correct. So you've got your BMR, which is to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure, which is quite a large chunk, right? Quite a large chunk. You've got your NEAT and your NENAT. So I'm just going to compare these two together. But remember, your NEAT and your NENAT is your subconscious and conscious daily activity that you're doing in your life. That is around 15%. That has the next largest weighting when it comes to your total daily energy expenditure. Then you've got your TEF, so your thermic effect of food, which has the next largest weighting, which is 10%. And this is what may surprise some of you listening in. Your exercise energy expenditure is only around 5% of your total daily energy expenditure.
I think that's much less than what most people think. But when you actually start to break down each of the individual components of this, it does make sense because where is the majority of your time spent throughout your day? Well, your body's on from the second you wake up. It's on to some extent when you're asleep as well. I would like to think
Yeah,
so. But
I hope it's always on, Sean.
but simply put, you're okay.
I think it's quite funny.
Not yours, Katie. Jesus, when you go to sleep, that's it.
I know. I'm
You
dead
sleep.
to the world.
You can sleep through an earthquake. Basically, your metabolism is going to be suppressed. Your energy burn, your energy utilization is going to be slowed significantly when you're asleep. But there are still processes which occur. You know, you're still breathing. You're still breaking down foods. You're still recovering and repairing tissue. There's lots of things that are still occurring when you're asleep. But we typically see that upon waking, energy utilization does pick up because you start your day, more activities are happening, the body's going through more different states. So you will experience increased calorie consumption throughout the day. Your exercise for most people, depending on the exercise itself, and again, this is why we talk about averages, typically will only last about an hour or so on average a day,
At most, right?
sometimes longer. Well, we walk the dog twice a day, and each dog walk is 30 to 45 minutes. So that's an hour to an hour and a half of walking, which we would class as neat in this example. So it's non-exercise. We don't class that as our exercise, but it's still activity. That's equivalent or more than what we would spend per day doing a gym session. And we do that every single day, 7 times a week. Then you've also got to consider the fact that both myself and Katie are probably in the upper bracket of individuals in terms of our protein intake and our fiber intake, and then just the total amount of food that we consume and the amount of whole foods that we also consume as well. So the average for thermic effect of food might be 10%, but we may actually be experiencing a little bit greater than that in our examples for us because of the diets that we have. If this is an average, then there's a significantly large part of the population that have less protein, less fiber, and probably less whole foods in their diet than us. Well, we eat anywhere between 4 to 6 times a day, every single day. So when you start to break all this stuff down, you think about it logically, the amount of time you spend exercising, whilst you may burn quite a lot of calories in the time that you're exercising, especially in certain forms of exercise, like cardio, higher intensity forms of cardio, it's got a high calorie burn per minute. Going back to that metabolic rate that we discussed earlier, if you put it down per minute or you put it down per hour, it's a high amount of energy burn, but you're only doing it for a short time of the day. What about all the other hours in your day?
Like you said, it's usually, let's just do a blanket statement of, an hour exercise a day. That's 1 hour out of your whole 24 hours. And I think and I think as soon as, um, I think if people can understand that actually is a small part, and this isn't to say stop exercising, it's absolutely not, but it's more to understand that that one gym session that you do isn't going to counteract eating way more calories than your body needs.
Absolutely not. I think at most people are probably burning around 400 calories per session in the gym, and that's really high intensity sessions. That's probably a session that's an hour to an hour and a half long. That's probably an individual that is a larger individual anyway. I think it's massively overestimated how much energy is actually burned through training. It's no different to doing cardio as well. Again, you might get a reasonable amount of calorie burn per minute or per hour compared to other activities that might require less effort and less energy, but it's still a fraction of what you're going to be burning throughout the day. And compared to what you're probably going to be eating, it's not even going to put a dent in it. And that's not to diminish the value of doing cardiovascular exercise. And it's not to say that training and exercise and cardio do not have impacts on weight loss or fat loss, because they both do.
Fat maintenance afterwards, because it's still part of your equation for energy expenditure every day. It's just probably not as large of an impact as you think.
Yeah, it's just extremely difficult for you to achieve weight loss or fat loss through exercise alone, because the amount of energy that you burn through exercise is much, much, much less than what you would expect to see. And it's
Absolutely.
and like Katie said, it's very easily cancelled out by one cookie, one bit of cake, 2 or 3 biscuits, 2 pints. It's very easy to cancel that exercise bout out.
I think it's getting used to separating the calories you burn in exercise. Like, if I can give you one piece of advice right now, is to just forget about the calories that you burn for exercise, in terms of, don't allow your mind to go to the place of, I'm going to the gym because I want to burn this calories, or I'm doing this run because I want to burn those calories. Just scrap that idea, because that is not helpful in any way. It's going to potentially make you feel like the only purpose of exercise is to burn calories to earn more food. And that's just a slippery slope for a really bad relationship with exercise.
I absolutely agree with your sentiment there, Katie. I really do. I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to give a very specific scenario where you may look to increase exercise,
Mhm.
or particularly cardiovascular exercise, for the purpose of achieving more weight loss or fat loss. And the only scenario where I'd ever consider this is for somebody that is at the bottom end of their weight loss. So, for example, they've achieved as much weight loss as they possibly can. Their body is starting to slow down the rate of loss considerably. They have already reduced their calorie intake to a level whereby they can't reduce it any further. They're already doing as many steps per day as possible to get their NEAT up, which is a lower intensity form of activity, which might encourage less of a hunger response. And they simply can't find the time to do more steps. And the most time efficient way for them to get into more of a calorie deficit when we're weighing up food intake versus um, calorie burn per day, the most efficient way is not to cut down the food, it's not to increase NEAT, it's to do some cardio. That is the only scenario where I would encourage people to start adding more cardio specifically for the purpose of weight loss or fat loss. Can you see how many hoops I had to go through to get to that exact nuanced scenario? Can you see how many conditional parts to that there were? So that's quite rare, isn't it?
And I would argue that that person's relationship with exercise is already pretty solid. They value it for their well-being. They feel good after doing it. They're doing it for the right reasons initially. Their relationship with that's pretty solid, and they understand that the purpose of this little bit extra is because they're looking for a little bit more of a, not extreme result, that's not the right thing, but they want to take their results to the next level and just need a little bit more output to take things to that next level.
Yeah. And some individuals, they prefer to have a little bit more freedom with their nutrition, freedom with their calories, freedom with their diet, freedom
Absolutely.
with their social life and their weekends. So they would prefer to do a bit of extra cardio than to reduce their food intake.
Yeah, for sure.
That's individual preference. It's not something that myself and Katie would necessarily encourage because I think that that can have negative consequences off the back of it. Again, another topic to discuss at another time, I think. But the main point that Katie is trying to make there, and what I'm trying to say here, is that that's like an emergency only button to start adding more cardio for the sake of weight loss or fat loss, because the total amount of energy you burn whilst doing extra cardio or extra exercise is going to be so small that it may not even make that much of a difference to your outcome, especially not if everything else isn't already locked in the right place.
Yeah, I fully agree. If you are quite confident with your nutrition, you roughly know how to eat around maintenance calories, you know how to manage that effectively, then cardio can be a great tool to give you a little bit more flexibility on top of that. But it's, again, I want to say this is as a bonus, as an add on. It could be a tool as well to utilize. And I don't want to take this off on too much of a tangent, but you can utilize it on a tool when you go on holidays, for example. It's not that you're doing cardio to burn off or earn food. It's just to give you a little bit more scope to have a little bit more flexibility with your diet because you want that. But it's different going in with that mindset than going in with the mindset of, I'm doing this exercise because I've got to earn food. I'm doing this exercise because I burn calories. They're different mindsets to have. And I think it's very important to just be aware of where you're sitting, where your mind is sitting on that spectrum.
Yeah, I've just got to follow off the back of what you said with being on holiday as an example here. Now you understand the breakdown of the different parts of what make up our total daily energy expenditure. We can describe what happens on holiday a little bit easier. You sometimes will have individuals that keep their steps really high on holiday, and they might even go to the gym on holiday. So the steps remain the same. The gym remains the same. So they try and do the walking to make up for it. But what about all the other stuff throughout the day? It was really hot on the holiday. So they spend the majority of the time sitting down. Their body's not naturally going to be moving and fidgeting as much because it's really bloody hot. They might spend half the time either sat in the pool or sitting in the pool like some sort of Buddhist monk, meditating in the pool, sat by the side of the pool, sat by the beach. They might sleep more throughout the day. So on the fitness watch, it looks like you're doing the same amount of steps and you're burning the same amount of calories. You might be doing some training, but the diet is slightly different. So there's a little bit less thermic effect of food, which can make up to what, 10% of your total daily energy expenditure. And then you got your NEAT. And there might be a reduction in NEAT because, well, you're not
Not cleaning the house, you're not doing the gardening,
exactly,
not taking the bins out.
exactly, you're not doing any of that because you're paying for somebody else's that for the week you're on holiday. Maybe if you've got an Airbnb, you're doing a little bit more of that stuff, but what we're doing here is we're getting you to think outside the box in terms of the activities that you do, because they're not all equal, and different environments will change how active you are on a day-to-day basis, and you have different forms of activity which you do. The vast majority of the energy that you burn every day is made up by your basal metabolic rate, and then how active you are outside of exercise, outside of training, outside of the gym, and the types of foods that you're breaking down and eating. Something to think about for sure.
100%. 'Cause it's just not as simple as calories in, calories out. It is as simple as that when it comes to energy balance, right? And whether you lose fat, maintain fat, gain fat, etc. How can you have any control over any of that if you don't understand what elements of that you can control? You'll start to learn more throughout this podcast, and I'm going to say the podcast after this too. It's very, very likely this will be split into two parts, and that breakdown that we just explained to you, that will make much more sense now as we start going through the podcasts, and you can understand the element that you can influence on a daily basis when you go on holidays, whatever it may be.
So as we discussed, BMR is the majority portion of your total daily energy expenditure. So the amount of calories you burn at rest make up the majority of your total daily energy expenditure. Your BMR is primarily influenced by physical metrics, some of which are controllable, like your weight and your body composition. Others, like your height and your age, are outside of your scope of control. Body mass and body composition have the biggest influence on your BMR. So basically, the size of your body and the amount of tissue on your body which requires energy are the biggest factors that make up how many calories you burn each day without accounting for physical activity and what you eat.
It's important to note you're not likely to increase BMR by huge margins, although muscle mass will increase body mass, which will increase BMR. So I think it's important to note that the more muscle mass you have, the more metabolically active tissue you have, which requires more energy to function on a daily basis. It's not as much as perhaps you think or have heard of in the social media space or in the fitness space. So, if you pack on X amount of muscle, you're going to burn hundreds of calories more per day. It's not quite that true. You're not going to burn that much more, but you are adding more mass to your frame that is metabolically active, that does require your body to utilize more calories on a daily basis.
It's something really small, isn't it, Casey? I can't remember the exact figure, but 10 calories per kilogram of muscle springs to mind.
I really can't remember the exact percentage off my mind. I can remember one sentence from my lecture notes, right, which is, if you could pack on 10 kilograms of muscle a year, which is near impossible,
Yeah.
right? Naturally, anyway, it's near impossible. But even if you could pack on that much, you're only looking at about 140 more calories per day. It was something wild like that, right? So take that with a pinch of salt, because again, I haven't got the notes to hand, and I can't remember quite the percentage that you are referring to.
They're close, aren't they?
Yeah,
They're close ballpark figures. It's really not a lot of energy you burn at rest every single day just by having the muscle on your body. It's not that the tissue itself is like this fat burning furnace that it's made out to be, but it's just the fact that when you are a bigger individual with more muscle, all your organs and all of your natural processes have to supply that tissue with blood, oxygen, energy. It has to repair that tissue. So it's the multiplied factor of having more tissue and having more size that means you burn more energy. It's not independently or directly due to the fact that you have more muscle that means you're burning a lot more calories every single day at rest. It's the fact that the body itself is larger and is burning more calories at rest as a result of having more tissue to supply.
and you want that tissue to be, when you're gaining mass, to be muscle rather than body fat, right? For many different reasons in terms of your health, but also for energy expenditure. But it's also you said it just now, Sean, mul-
Multiplication factor, I
oh,
think, is
good
what I was trying
God.
to say.
Adding new words to my vocab
We've
now.
got oversimplification and multiplication.
But it goes beyond just what's happening in the body then with that, right? Because the more muscle mass you have, generally the more active person you are naturally, because that is something that you're prioritizing in your day-to-day life. You might have more energy because you feel good about yourself, that you are then doing more steps, more work in training. Yes, your body's going to become more efficient. So you've got to balance that out with the fact that actually your body's more efficient at performing tasks now. So maybe burn less calories that way. But overall, you're more likely to be leading a healthier, more active lifestyle, which then multiplies your NEAT, NEAT, and energy expenditure on a daily basis. So it's, again, not fine tuning one or zooming in on one element. It's understanding they all have, well, can either have a positive impact on things or a negative impact on things.
100%. And if you lose muscle mass over the years because you're not training, you're not lifting weights, you're not giving that muscle a reason to stick around, then you will reduce your BMI. That's before we even consider the reduction of physical activity, which will likely occur if you're losing muscle mass on top of the reduction in your BMR. So you can see how things do start to decline, and already you'll be starting to build a picture of how things start to decline for people as they age. When you consider your total daily energy expenditure as a whole, then it's fair to say you have a much greater influence on this than you do on your BMR. There's a lot more that is controllable in your total daily energy expenditure as a whole than how much relatively you can control your BMR. Your TDEE is far more subject to change, either daily or over time, as your physical activity levels change as you go through stages of life and as your body composition changes. So we speak about the reduction of muscle mass and potentially the gain of fat mass at certain stages. Those are factors which are controllable and they are preventable. It's probably fair to say that they should take up the bulk of your focus when it comes to trying to maintain a healthy metabolism or total daily energy expenditure each day. Key takeaway from this entire segment is that body mass and body composition primarily determine your BMR. I don't think we need to go on about that any longer here because I think we've done it thoroughly enough. What we're going to go into now is we're going to talk about the relationship between age and decreasing energy expenditure, because this is what many people will attribute towards increasing body fat levels as they get older and an inability to lose weight as efficiently, as an effect, and as quickly as when they were younger.
And this is what holds many people back, right? From feeling their best, holding a healthy body composition, because they think they're doomed as they get older, but perhaps don't quite understand the elements that they can control.
This is a really challenging topic to discuss, isn't it, Katie? I think it's one of the things that is handled really insensitively in the online space, particularly when it comes to putting content out there. I understand that that content creators can't be nuanced with everything they say, and they can't address every single person's emotions in the audience when they're describing, what the research tells us, or when they're describing what the best available information is. But in the same regards, just because the science tells us one thing doesn't mean that factors like age don't play a part on people's well-being and on people's ability to lose weight or maintain a healthy total daily energy expenditure.
I agree, but it's the part age plays isn't necessarily always because you're aging. It's because perhaps you're in a different phase of your life. You've got different responsibilities, different challenges to face, which impact how you run your life day to day, will impact your activity levels, will impact your meal structure, your meal pattern, will impact how well you sleep. All of these change throughout the phases of your life. They look very different in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. That's where it can be easier or simpler to blame something like metabolism than just understand that your day-to-day life is coming with different responsibilities and challenges for you to navigate.
I think the main point is to say that age does play a part with your physical activity levels and your diet and your nutrition. Age does have an influence on those. but it doesn't have an influence on individuals' metabolism and energy expenditure in the way that they think it does.
Yeah, I agree. I agree fully.
Fortunately, we actually have some really robust research in this area, which can help us to understand this a lot better. In 2021, there was a very large scale analysis done by Ponce and colleagues. The purpose of this was to look at total daily energy expenditure throughout the human life course. 6,421 individuals were analysed as subject as part of this research.
Very large population, isn't it, actually?
Perhaps something which is even more fascinating and empowering is that 64% of these subjects were female. Subjects were from various locations, so geographical locations, and ages ranged from 8 to 95. So this was a very broad research project.
It's great that this particular study covers so many ages and also both sexes. Because quite often in research, we don't always see a large proportion of research being done in females. So it's quite nice that this meta-analysis has covered a lot of ages, both sexes, and different phases of life.
And I started shaking my head in the middle of that, and Katie thought she wanted me to stop her from talking. But I was shaking my head because I'm familiar with how disproportionately represented females are in research a lot of the time. And I really like the fact that this paper has a slight majority towards female subjects, because I think that there are very important nuances that also need to be considered, and for hormonal changes in females as they go through their different stages in life as well. So it's really helpful to know that this data has been predominantly on females.
So it covers when women go through pregnancy,
Yep, there were pregnant women as part of this analysis as well.
perhaps. So then you've also got the postpartum period. And then, of course, women going through perimenopause and menopause would also have been.
And postmenopause, yeah.
Yeah, great study. Tell me then, Sean, what was found?
So the authors' analysis of all these subjects found that energy expenditure relative to fat-free mass doesn't decrease until after age 60 in both sexes. In other words, what we mean by this is, as an independent factor, age does not directly contribute to burning less calories each day. When we account for changes in your body mass, and particularly fat-free mass, and when we say fat-free mass, we are referring to muscle mass here. When we account for the changes that happen in those tissues, we don't see further declines in energy expenditure on average. This means that our BMR is not necessarily changing due to age. It is due to changes in body composition as you age. And total daily energy expenditure is reduced as a result of having lower body mass, typically less fat-free mass or muscle mass, and lower activity levels. That's a sledgehammer of a statement, isn't it?
It really, really is. You explained that perfectly and really well too. To think that it's not the human body, your body that you're living in, it's not just declining because you're getting older. It's declining because of things that you can control, like your muscle mass, like how much activity you do a day, like your choice around exercise, like your choice around nutrition. You hold the power to make those changes.
I know that hearing that information can be a difficult pill to swallow. This research basically confirmed that metabolism is not responsible for why you're struggling to lose weight between the age of 30 to 60. It's not responsible for why you have a hard time keeping weight off. And it's not responsible for why you have a hard time losing weight when you're attempting to lose weight. It's not specifically due to your age for why this is the case, because your metabolism, your basal metabolic rate, significantly between the ages of 30 to 60. 30 years of your life where your metabolism is not naturally declining in the way that you think it is. Remember, BMR makes up the majority of your total daily energy expenditure. So it's the other factors that make up part of your total daily energy expenditure which are responsible for why you may think your metabolism is slower. because you're burning less calories per day through other means. And there's a very good chance that your nutrition has either stayed the same or got worse over time, which means that you're now eating more calories than what you were previously. Now, if this triggers anyone listening to this, I want you to just take a moment and just completely flip this on its head. Because which problem would you rather face? A problem that you have absolutely zero control of, or a problem which is essentially fully in your hand? Yes, it is hard to change these things. Yes, it can be a struggle at times. Yes, it can be difficult. Yes, it can feel like you've let yourself down a little bit, or you're a bit disappointed in yourself for not recognizing this pattern, for not changing it sooner. I don't know how many times I've heard from my clients, I wish I'd have started this sooner. I wish I knew this information 20, 30 years ago. After I've taught them how to have a better relationship with their food, how to make appropriate diet choices for the stage of life that they're in, how to make sure that their training is consistent, enjoyable, and something which they can show up and do on a weekly basis consistently for years and years. How to build muscle mass regardless of what decade they are currently in their lives. I don't know how many times I've heard, I wish I'd have started this sooner. I hear it time and time again. I know it can be frustrating. I know it can be disappointing. I know your first reaction is to say, this is a load of shit. I don't want anything to do with this. And if that's the option you choose to take, and that's the pathway which you choose to take as a result of hearing this information, that's absolutely fine. Stop the podcast now. You never have to listen to us again. We're only presenting you with the information that the research and science confirms to us. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Don't shoot the messenger. But I promise you, if you take this information on board and you use it to your advantage, the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years could look vastly different to you than if you completely ignore the information and you shut the door on this. This should be an incredibly empowering realization. It motivates me enormously. It motivates me enormously to know that age is not going to define whether I get fat, gain too much fat, or struggle to lose fat or not. There is nothing more encouraging to me to know that it's my actions, my day-to-day actions that determine that outcome. Because every single time I go and make a choice to eat healthier food, every single time I make a choice not to get in my car and drive somewhere and I walk instead, every single time I go to the gym when I'm feeling tired or I don't really want to go, I know for a fact that that action is contributing enormously towards not just my well-being in that moment, but the next year of my life, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next couple of decades. It's going to set me apart if I continue with those actions. Because the people that ignore this information and people that ignore this advice, they will be on the decline.
It can feel like a kick in the gut right now, but honestly, if you can take control of the elements that you can control, and it really doesn't take a lot a week, and that's not me to belittle the changes right now, because it's not, because for some people this might feel like a mountain. You're talking a couple of hours a week, 3 to 5 hours a week, to literally keep depositing into your well-being, your health, your body for the rest of your life, across the whole week. Right? It's really not a large investment of your time, and the return you get back is huge. Like Sean was mentioning earlier, not just now, every time he makes a decision to walk, sitting in the car, every time he makes a decision to have a healthy meal, all of these little, I'm going to call them decisions every day, they are depositing coins into his health, his body composition, his well-being now and for the future. And I always like to think about it, the decisions I make day to day. It's not that they're either good or bad. It's not that this is perfect or not perfect. It's okay, that decision, that's give me another coin in the bank. That decision's give me another coin in the bank. It's the compound interest. Exactly like when you invest money and you get compound interest over the years, whether you're investing privately, whether you're investing in your pension, you're hoping by the time you're older, you've got a lovely pot to play with. Well, it's exactly the same with your health. You either choose to keep investing coins in that every day, not perfectly, but keep investing coins that are going to add to that well-being bank. So every decade of your life, that pot is growing, not declining. And that is your choice. That really is your choice, whether you keep investing in your body and your well-being and your health, or you choose not to. That is in your power.
I was listening to a podcast the other day where it was three elite level natural bodybuilders, and they were just talking about what got them into bodybuilding, what got them into competing, what their kind of outlooks are on the sport. And it was quite nice to hear about like what their day to day looks like and what their mindsets are going about their day, and how they manage bodybuilding around their personal lives, etc. And one of the things which one of the competitors said, and these guys are the best of the best, right? These are competing at world championship level, so they're right up there. One of the things that the guy said was so incredibly revealing, and he was talking about longevity and he was talking about health, and the whole conversation was geared around how it's a real priority for him to have the best possible future for himself and longevity. And all I could take from this podcast was that he didn't necessarily start training and start looking after his body for the purpose of wanting to become a bodybuilder. He started training for his own aesthetic purposes because he wanted to look better, he wanted to feel more confident in himself, kind of thing. And he wanted to look after his body throughout all stages of his life. And he just loved it and he got into it and he enjoyed it, which some people aren't fortunate enough to do, but many of us are. Many of us really enjoy the lifestyle that comes with eating healthily and training on a regular basis and building our bodies, getting stronger, etc. He just so happened to do it so much, so consistently, with a few maybe genetic cards that happen to kind of fall in his hand. But aside from those minor differences, he just done it so much, so consistently, and with such a high degree of effort and such a high degree of frequency that he happened to build this absolutely incredible physique. Went into the right gym environment at the right time, and somebody encouraged him to give bodybuilding a go. So he started competing in bodybuilding. Quickly realized that he was really, really, really good at it. Um, Ended up eventually going really far with it. And there weren't challenges and struggle. But it's like, why do you keep doing it? And it's like, like the question was, why do you still do that? You've already achieved so much. Well, there's a thrill of being at the top of your game and wanting to stay at the top of your game for long enough for one, right? That clearly is a factor. But still, at the back of his mind, as he was describing this podcast, it's about longevity because all the muscle he has now is going to be with him for as long as possible in life. And I echo everything he said in that podcast. He still wants to look good on the beach in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time. He still wants to feel confident about himself. He still wants to be able to move around with the ease of somebody that's younger, even when he's talking about his exercise selection and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, do you know what? Like, what do I want from older life? I'm in my 30s now. What do I want from my 40s, from my 50s, from my 60s? Well, I want to feel just as confident in myself on the beach as I would now, or more confident, considering where I'm at that stage in my life. I want to be able to go out and eat with my family and have high calorie meals and enjoy experiences without having to worry about loads of fat gain and feeling really guilty and feeling like I have to constantly keep watching my calories every single time I do anything. I want to be able to go and do hikes, long walking experiences, go and explore different towns, go up and down steps on holiday in 25 to 30-degree heat because I'm fit enough to do it and I'm fit enough to handle it. This guy is at the absolute top of his game and he's still thinking about just general longevity and looking after himself and the simple things that often get a lot of us started and a lot of the things that we want from our lives as we get older. So we're not all that different, really. A lot of us aren't actually that different. It's just to what extreme you want to go with it, to what extent you want to go with it, how much time and effort you're wanting and able to put into it. But I guess the purpose of me saying all this is that, like, I look at my future years in life and I think every single action I'm taking now is an investment or a subtraction from those years. And that provides me with a lot of peace, enjoyment, and content in the here and now as well, because it is paying off in the here and now, but it's going to pay off a hell of a lot in the future as well.
It's compounding, right? It's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? We probably all want similar things, just different levels, different extremes, whatever it may be. We all want to feel good in ourselves. We all want to be fit enough, strong enough to be able to do whatever we want to do at any point of our life. And we hold the power to change that and do that. But it doesn't happen in 1 week. It doesn't happen from a good year. It happens by continually putting those coins in your well-being bank.
Bit of a side tangent there, but I want to bring us back to the scientific literature and I want to go back into the data a little bit further. There's a few more things that I think are really valuable from the research that we have. We think about what influence age has. Well, not just this research, but data from a number of different sources show that on average, physical activity will steadily decline from middle age to old age. When we talk middle age, typically what is described as middle age in research is between ages 40 through to 50. Now, I think this data, which ranges from between about 2014 all the way up to 2019, I think this is going to look different in 10 years' time, Katie. I think this is going to look different because I think physical activity is not just declining in middle age anymore. I think people are working longer hours than they ever have done. I think we are outdoors less. I think people give up a lot of their sports earlier in life to have families, to pursue careers. I think physical activity is declining a lot earlier than the middle age nowadays. And I think that if we were to review the same data in 10 years' time, I think we would see more of a decline than this.
I think there's a lot of people's lives that are probably more sedentary than not. Like you said, not just from middle age onwards. 20s and 30s, there's a lot more of it now, isn't there?
Got Wolf Hughes and colleagues in 2014, both male and female. Hager and colleagues in 2016, Kwan and colleagues in 2019, Schmutz in 2018. All of these papers have shown a decrease in physical activity levels and steady decline into middle age. And they actually tend to decrease then into old age as well. So when we say about, is my metabolism declining? Not so much, but physical activity definitely is for the majority of the population.
And what you know now about what makes up your total daily energy expenditure, you can see how that, with activity declining, because it's not just your exercise, it's what you do day to day, how you move around, how sedentary you are. That's going to impact how many calories you burn a day. So you may think it's your metabolism slowing down, but it's not actually your metabolism slowing down. It's actually that you're just using less energy by the nature of you doing less as you get older.
Now, a lot of people probably be asking, well, what about 20s into 30s? And I think this is a fair consideration as well. There may be a small difference in your total daily energy expenditure. There may be a very small difference in your BMR from early 20s compared to going into your 30s. But this is minor. It's not going to be as much of an impact as what you would think. It's certainly not as much of an impact as, being in your 20s compared to being in your 60s. That's slightly different. Throughout the majority of the middle ages of life and the middle years of life, you're not going to see much of a shift in BMR. We are going to see typically a shift in total daily energy expenditure, which is confirmed by the research.
And the earlier you can grasp that, and the earlier you know this information, the earlier you're aware of how you can change your lifestyle to counteract what normally happens or what we see to happen as life goes on.
Katie, talk us through the pattern which we typically see in the research with how people's body composition changes.
And body composition, what we mean here is how much muscle mass you have and how much fat mass you have, in simple terms, right? The pattern generally shows that fat mass peaks in the Middle Ages and body fat percentage also peaks in the Middle Ages.
So more fat in middle ages of life. And generally the highest amount of fat that people have in their life.
And that total body mass also peaks, but then this slowly declines into old age. But the decline is typically in both muscle mass and fat mass. So this results in less energy being burned each day. And this is true of both sexes, right? Male and female. And when TDEE and BMR values are compared between men and women, after adjusting for fat-free mass and fat mass, the figures are nearly identical. The difference is in the absolute fat mass and potentially fat distribution.
There's some big takeaways in that. So essentially what we see is that people naturally lose fat as they get older. The reason for this is for a number of reasons related to eating habits of older age individuals. A lot of them don't experience the same appetite when they get older. There's less hedonic pleasure from food. Food is less enjoyable. Dental problems where it's harder to consume certain foods and to chew, which can often put people off having their food. And if you combine that with a decline in physical activity, the decline in physical activity levels, which we commonly see, then there isn't much hunger induced by more physical activity. So we typically see this, but this is also combined with a reduction in fat-free mass, particularly in untrained individuals. Fat-free mass being muscle mass, you can use those two terms interchangeably for the sake of this. So we will see a reduction in BMR in those age categories. So we typically see a reduction in total daily energy expenditure as a result of those. And as we've discussed, you can lower your basal metabolic rate if you are losing muscle mass and you're losing body mass overall. However, when we adjust those, so if you were to keep your fat mass and your body fat mass constant and just look at age as an independent variable, BMR doesn't reduce. Total daily energy expenditure, provided activity stays the same, fat mass stays the same, fat-free mass stays the same, doesn't reduce between 30 and 60.
And that's empowering, right? That is really empowering because, yes, sarcopenia, the loss of muscle, does occur as you age. We do see that a human body, as it ages, becomes less sensitive to building muscle mass. But that doesn't mean you can't build new muscle mass at any age. You have the power to start building muscle mass at any age and continue to keep building muscle mass at any age. And if you can do that and adapt your lifestyle so you're not sedentary every day, that you have some activity, you do some exercise, then you can keep your TDEE at a pretty high level. Pair that with understanding how you can manage your diet to support that, then you can be in control of your body composition and your quality of life until the day you die.
Let's bring the conversation back to the sex differences because I think that this is just so interesting. So again, adjusting for fat-free mass and fat mass. So assuming you have a man and woman, they both have exactly the same amount of muscle mass and exactly the same amount of fat mass, we would see virtually identical BMR and TDE values as assuming activity levels are all the same as well, of course. So what really differs between males and females? Well, typically it's just body mass in general. Females tend to carry more fat mass relative to men. If you were to account for how many kilograms of body fat a female carries compared to a man of equivalent body weight, you would find that the female typically would carry more body fat. And also fat distribution. So when we talk about fat distribution, we mean where the fat is stored on your body. That can differ between male and female counterparts as well, can't it, Katie?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
those are some of the biggest differences we see. It's where the fat is stored.
I don't want to talk too much about that at the moment because I know later on in the podcast or perhaps the next episode, we're going to dive into menopause, women versus men, individual differences in a lot more depth, right? So I think it's just being aware of that and bringing that to the forefront of your mind at the moment. But ultimately knowing that the only reason men can eat more calories than women is generally just because they have more muscle mass and they weigh more. So they're just a larger individual and their body just needs more energy to function, to move around, to exercise, to recover. And women, if you want to be able to eat more calories, pack on some muscle mass, have an active lifestyle, capitalize on the bonus points of thermic effective food by eating as many whole foods in your diet as you can. It's those choices that will allow you to, if you want to, of course, have the access to eating a little bit more calories than perhaps you currently do.
And remember, this research was 64% females, so it was slightly biased towards the female population. The pattern is near identical. So what we see is declining physical activity levels typically from middle age into old age and continuing into old age. And we often see a reduction in fat-free mass, which further decreases your total daily energy expenditure as you age. You experience an early reduction in your fat-free mass as a result of not training, as a result of eating a low protein diet, then you'll experience an earlier reduction in your total daily energy expenditure. So your metabolism isn't naturally slowing as you age, it's slowing as you lose muscle and lose body fat. But particularly what we see here is the primary factor which determines whether your BMR and your total daily energy expenditure drops as a result of body composition change is fat-free mass. It's that muscle mass that is so important.
Because muscle does help our body stay metabolically healthy, right? It's tissue that allows us to utilize the glucose, the energy in our bloodstreams well. It allows that part of our body, that process in our body to keep functioning. So we keep our insulin sensitivity fairly high. We don't start becoming insulin resistant because we've got the muscle mass there that allows the glucose in our bloodstreams to be taken up. And you have the power to keep that tissue, to build that tissue, to keep that tissue on your body, to allow your body to function as metabolically healthy as it possibly can for as long as it can.
So you have less unpredictable peaks and troughs in your energy levels each day. So you don't have those feelings of feeling like you're ridiculously tired and lethargic and really fatigued as often. And then all of a sudden you have a rush of energy. And then you go back through that high and that low again.
You still have an appetite because your body is working, it's burning, it's functioning. You keep that appetite going.
I think we need to get outside the box of just thinking, oh, muscle itself as its own doesn't burn that much tissue. But think of it like this. In order to get the muscle, you have a more active individual in the first place. We know that physical activity naturally declines based on what the research is telling us. And we typically see this. You just look around at your family members, you look around at your friendship groups. How many people stop exercising and stop training past a certain age of life? Oh, I'm past my sell by date.
I'm old now, love.
Yeah, that's for the young ones kind of thing. This happens. This does happen. To be able to preserve muscle as you age, you have to be doing the exercise, you have to be doing the training. When you have more muscle, you have easier access to physical activity. So going for a walk is easier. You can do a walk in probably half the time because your joints are stronger. Your muscles are propelling you forward. They're able to hold you more upright. You're not having the back pain and the hip pain and the knee pain and the ankle pain when you're trying to just go about doing your day-to-day activity. All of the stuff that makes up the majority of your total daily energy expenditure, your cleaning of your house, your garden, your shopping, all of the activities that take up a larger portion of your total daily energy expenditure, we spoke about the NEAT habits and the NENAT habits, like going for a walk, you doing the gardening, doing the shopping, doing the cleaning of your house. They burn 3 times as many calories daily as the exercise itself. The exercise itself, to build the muscle, allows you to do all those other tasks with ease. It allows you to do more of those other tasks because you're not fatiguing as much. You're not in pain as much. It's not as much effort for you to be able to do that. If you're reducing your muscle mass and increasing your fat mass, is it as possible for you to be as active? Because fat doesn't work in the same way that muscle does. It can actually inhibit movement a little bit because it's a tissue. It gets in the way. It's uncomfortable to move around. It increases your body mass, but it increases your body mass with tissue that isn't as functional to be able to move your skeleton around.
And it's not as functional for the chemical processes in the body to occur either. Negatively impacts that.
When you build muscle, you're also improving your bone density. So you've got less chance of, if you do have a fall, if you do get injured, you're not going to suffer as much in terms of breakage. So you don't have to spend 6 months out after you've fallen and broken your leg, which then decreases your physical activity for 6 months of one of the years of your life. And you're also strengthening up your connective tissue. So you're less likely to get problems with your tendons and joint pain. So it's not just the calorie burn effect of having muscle on your body. It's what that having all that muscle allows you to do as a human being. And the calories that you burn from doing all the other stuff that helps you to keep your total daily energy expenditure as high as possible. Yes, it keeps your BMR as high as possible because you're not rapidly declining in body weight or having tissue that isn't as metabolically active. But it's all the other activities on top, like we broke down earlier.
It's the compound effect again, isn't it? It's going back to that. It's everything has a knock-on effect to the next thing. And
Oh, and if you're eating to support the muscle mass that you have, then you're eating more protein, so you're burning more calories from eating more protein. I think we've made it clear enough that you should really prioritize having some bloody muscle mass.
Absolutely. There's not one person on this planet that won't benefit from having more muscle mass.
I don't care if you want to be a bodybuilder or not. I don't care if you want to look like one. I don't care if you want to jump on stage like one. But at least for some parts of your week and at least for some parts of your life, train like one and eat like one. Really high protein diet, lots of whole food sources, minimize junk food, minimize alcohol, minimize processed food, take your sleep really seriously, minimize your stress levels, go and lift weights with intensity, push yourself hard, aim to build the muscle, aim to get stronger, prioritize your recovery. They're viewed as extreme habits because the result we see from the individuals that do them far more frequently and with far more time investment ends up being an extreme result. But the habits are literally giving you the best quality of life for as long as possible and are extremely healthy habits to follow.
Couldn't agree more. And I just feel that somewhere along the way, healthy habits have become not the norm, and it's like an exception to the rule to have healthy habits and live by them. And I just would love that narrative to be flipped on its head.
Yeah.
And hopefully we've inspired you today to start or keep going or invest a little bit more into these elements or these characteristics that are going to allow you to build a body that serves you now and in the future.
So just to summarize that segment, the data collectively indicates that instead of energy expenditure being reduced in the Middle Ages due to decline in metabolism, it is indirectly more of an effect of reduced fat-free mass and decreased physical activity. This was a summary provided by Mass Research Review on the Poncer analysis.
It's a great summary. It's a great summary. Keep that summary in your mind and work with it.
Keep your muscle mass and be active, not just in exercise, but outside of exercise as much as you can. Before we round off part one, I think we should just give a little bit of time to balance the other side of the equation. We've been incredibly encouraging about training as you get older, keeping active as you get older, maintaining your muscle mass as you get older. But there are some problems with doing that as you get older, right? There's a reason why people struggle with maintaining physical activity. And we see declining rates of physical activity and muscle mass as people age, right? And again, this is one of the areas which I think is handled a little bit insensitively at times, perhaps a little bit judgmentally by young coaches like myself and Katie who are in their prime, in their 30s, thinking it's never going to decline for them, like making out that we're going to be like this for the rest of their lives. We are, but we can't prove that right now, right? It's not as easy for everyone. Let's discuss briefly some of the different things which influence that decline in physical activity level, particularly with aging, because it does have a part to play. And what would our practical recommendations be to try and change that?
You're right to bring this to the table today, Sean. And I think what we've discussed so far, even though it's very empowering to understand it, it is very logistical. It's what you can do, what is happening in the human body, but it doesn't mean there aren't barriers along the way. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to face challenges at different decades in your life that have the potential to disrupt you being able to train consistently, eat a healthy, nutritious diet majority of the time, prioritize your recovery. And I'm going to argue that probably, depending on what decade of your life you're in, there will be different challenges with different parts of the equation, shall we say. So, for example, you just become a parent and you have this living human being that needs caring for 24 hours a day. That's going to change your lifestyle, how you run your day to day, on its head. You might not have as much time to get out and go for a walk as much as you used to. You might not have time to go to the gym as frequently as you could before you had this child. So that's going to impact your overall energy expenditure because you might not be able to do quite as much as you were doing prior to this child. Does that mean that's going to happen for the rest of your life? No, because your child will grow up. But then there could be another challenge later in your life. You could have changed job roles that impact amount of time you have to spend traveling to work, amount of time you have to spend sitting down in work.
The amount of time you spend commuting to get to and from work, which is what we see all the time. It's not just the working hours themselves. You might be on shift for 7 or 8 hours, and you think, oh, well, I got a few hours spare after that shift or before that shift to be able to go get the gym work done. But then you might spend anywhere between half an hour to 2 hours of that sat in traffic. There goes a bit of your time outside of work. And you got to eat, and you got to prepare stuff for the next day.
And then we'd go on another decade or two, and you might be coming close to your retirement. And actually, you might have had a very manual job or more active job that was on your feet. And now all of a sudden, your 5 days a week of work have gone. And you're like, well, what do I do now? What am I going to do to be active? How's that routine going to look like? So I'm sure you get the picture here that every decade of your life does need to be approached differently because you're going to have different challenges, responsibilities that impact how your lifestyle is going to be run on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. You will experience physical decline unless the appropriate interventions are in place. But there are times where you can't pursue those interventions with 100% consistency or 100% commitment because you're going through a transition stage. Life has many different stages, many different transition points, sometimes unexpectedly as well. You can lose your job in the blink of an eye. Your company might go bust or be instantly made redundant. There's so many things that can just change in the blink of an eye. Anything could happen. So you can't always prepare for those outcomes. It's understanding that you don't have to be 100% consistent. You don't have to be 100% committed. We're not talking about the elite level, world championship level bodybuilders that we discussed earlier here that cannot miss a beat because otherwise they instantly fall behind their competition. Your only competition really is yourself. So it's a lot easier to maintain muscle mass and keep up some degree of physical activity that's going to allow your metabolism to function more healthily than people realize. I'm talking about maintain. The longer you leave it and the more times you avoid doing it, the more doubt starts to creep in. With a lot of the aging population, there's a fear of falling, there's a fear of injury. So they're put off doing the activities to begin with because they're worried that they're going to injure themselves and make themselves worse. And by putting off doing those activities, they're not creating the changes and the adaptations in the body that will make things better for them, that will make their joints stronger and their muscles more resilient, and for them to feel fitter and healthier, to be able to then have the confidence to go and do more activity, to build up their calorie intake again. And it's things like, a lot of mothers that I've worked with postpartum, they lose confidence in their bodies because their bodies have been through this big shift and this big change. They lose confidence in their ability to do the things they used to do before motherhood. What they don't realize is how quickly that stuff comes back when they start doing it again. But the initial fear of doing it again is what prevents them from doing it. And before you know it, you've got the compounding effect then of losing muscle over time. You've got the compounding effect of physical activity getting less and less and less because you can very easily find yourself in a habit and not doing this stuff. And I think a lot of people actually do grow quite comfortable with decline. This is why we have the stupid statements that I just absolutely hate. Oh, you wait until you get in your 30s. You wait until you get in your 40s. You wait until you get in your 50s. Like everyone will know somebody that says these things. There's nobody that's an exception to the rule where these statements are just nothing but disempowering by people that unfortunately have not taken ownership of their decline and not put the measures in place to prevent it. As soon as you accept that in yourself, as soon as you accept that narrative, you are on the decline. You're on that slippery slope because you don't change things that you accept.
No, you absolutely don't. You just get brainwashed into that narrative that you're telling to yourself. Are confirming to yourself that it's just because you're in your 30s, it's just because you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it may be. And if you want to accept that for yourself, then you crack on. That's absolutely okay. But if you don't, because I sure don't, I am literally going to make sure I am still running, jumping, lifting more than my body weight, if possible. I'm going to bloody try. Do pull up when I'm in my 60s, when I'm in my 70s. Because
Yeah,
there's no proof out there that tells me that I can't do that.
Well, you better be following Katie's Instagram for the next 30 or 40 years to see if she's actually living up to this.
Oh, you bet I will. I want it for myself, right? I want that. I don't want to not have a good quality of life for the rest of my life. I don't want it. And I don't want to be the reason I'm holding myself back from it.
And hopefully by listening to this podcast, you'll realize that we do acknowledge where age plays a part. I think what we've described about the clients we've worked with, about the different variables and factors which affect you mentally and physically as you age, we're not denying that those don't exist. But what we're saying is we we don't want them to be the thing which stops you from having the future and the lifestyle that you want, because they don't have to be the thing which stops you.
They exist. They're real. They're there. But you can work with yourself to overcome them.
And how I recommend working with these things is to focus on what is the minimum effective dosage of what I can do right now. So the power of momentum and the power of seeing results and seeing progress for me overrides everything else. It doesn't matter what you're doing right now. If it's absolutely nothing at all, diddly squat, well, great. You can do anything and you'd be improving. Absolutely anything at all. It becomes difficult to accept it when you're doing a few things, but you can't really give much more right now. Like, you're only able to get to the gym maybe 2 times a week at most. You don't have an awful amount of spare time to increase your step count. You don't have the optimal family structure to be able to have super healthy whole food meals all the time, because it might be too expensive. It might be that there's too many people in and out the house. We're not all sat down to eat at the same time. So you're cooking in relays. There's all these different factors that come into play. So you can't go for optimal. You have to find something that's just a bit more effective, 1%, 2% more effective than what you were doing previously. And if you can start to build upon those improvements, what will happen is everything compounds itself. So you start feeling yourself better and you start getting to sleep on time, for example. You've got more energy than the next day. That energy then can be used to improve your physical activity or your step count. You might find your gym sessions are more effective. You might find that you build more muscle in your gym sessions because you're more energized and you've got more focus. When you build more muscle in those gym sessions, it's easier for you to just go out for a run. So you don't have to worry about spending an hour a day trying to get your steps up, because you might be able to do that in 20 minutes if you can go for a run. Because you're going for a run, that's improving your fitness levels. So your recovery is better. So then you can get to the gym 3 times a week rather than 2. And now, because you're going to the gym 3 times a week and that's becoming a regular part of your routine, you're also thinking about how you're going to fuel for those gym sessions, because you're enjoying it so much. You don't want it to drop. You don't want it to start to feel like you're not getting the most out of it. So you're naturally making more protein-based food choices. And because you're fuller longer, then you're not snacking as much. And because you're not snacking as much, you're not over-consuming calories. So then you're not gaining as much fat. So rather than thinking about a decline, why not think about this increasing compounding domino effect that I just described? Now, if you like the way that I broke that down for you, then you'd absolutely love our coaching, because it's exactly how we set up our clients for success. We have coached clients in pretty much every walk of life, in every decade of life, in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, and in their 60s. Consistent feedback we get is, I wish I'd have started this sooner. Doesn't matter what age group they're in. Our clients get leaner than they've ever got before. They have more muscle mass than they've ever got before. They are stronger in the gym than they ever were before. They find things enjoyable that they never used to find enjoyable. They have more confidence to back themselves in situations they wouldn't find themselves being more confident in outside of the gym. Things like going for a job promotion, things like starting a business, being self-employed. Things like going on holiday and allowing themselves unconditional permission to eat whatever foods they want. And what makes this possible? Despite the fact that they're all at different stages of life, with kids, without kids, working, retired, single, married with a family, it doesn't matter. We see consistent results across the board because of how well we individualize the approach for the individual. And because we focus on breaking things down step by step, what is the next action that's going to get you the best possible returns for the time that you invest into that action, what is achievable, what is realistic, and what is going to make you feel good about this process, so you keep showing up for yourself and you keep doing it consistently enough to get to that result that you want in the long. That might be getting on holiday in the next 6 weeks. That might be looking your best in your wedding dress in 12 months' time, or it might be outpacing all the other 50s and 60 or 70-year-olds in the park, running around after your grandchildren and not feeling like you're going to break every single time you step a foot outside the front. I want to be the old fart on the beach that all the young guys look up to and go, I want to look like that when I'm older. That's my motivation. And I want my kids and my grandkids to look at that guy and go, oh my God, yeah. How did Grampy do it? How did Grandpa do it? Or how did Dad do it? I want to be like my dad when I grow up. I want to be like my grandpa when I grow up. If
Where's that inquiry form, Sean? So I want to sign up with you right now.
you are signed up with me,
I literally was just sat here listening to you so passionately talk about that. I, I was just sat here smiling and nodding along and going, yeah, do you know what? That is it. That is our coaching in a nutshell. It's why our clients are with us for a long time, right? They're with us a long time because that return they get, it keeps compounding. It's not, oh, I've achieved that 8-week goal, now I'm done and dusted. It's like, oh, what's next for me? This is great. I'd be fantastic for this. Yeah, it's not all sunshine and roses because what is in life, right? It's not. But like we've identified in this podcast, there's different challenges, responsibilities all throughout every phase of your life. That doesn't mean you can't keep compounding that interest in a positive way for your well-being.
and it starts by you going to the description for this podcast, hitting the link to that inquiry button, getting in contact with one of us, and we'll show you how it all works.
You honestly want to regret.
And we will show you how you can be the person that defies age, that says bullshit to it going downhill in my 30s or in my 40s or in my 50s or in my 60s, because we've got a community full of people that are completely defying that logic right now. And you can ask any one of them, they are proving it. They are living proof that age will not make you decline because every single one of them in that community are currently improving. And a bit like that research paper that we talked about earlier, different genders, different populations, different geographical locations, different age bracket, different walks of life, exactly the same as our community.
What a place it is to be.
Click the link, get in touch, let's get started.
And that's a wrap for part 1. Part 2 will be released next week. And you're going to want to tune back in. This is where we'll deep dive individual differences, how eating in relationships impact your TDEE, differences with men and women, if there are any, menopause, how that impacts fat distribution, your TDEE, how you can navigate that. And then maybe some more points we bring in by then. But you're not going to want to miss this, so make sure you tune in next week for part 2. We'll see you then.